this morning. I'm ready for summer. I'm not ready for winter. I think it's just teasing me. Welcome and thank you for making the trip to Augusta. For those of you who don't know me, I'm Colin Welch. I'm president of MeASBO. If you need internet access, I would choose regular Calumet for the network. And the password is Calumet with a small c 22, the number 2 and 2. So Calumet 22. So I was reminded at the last meeting we had a month ago that I didn't really go around the room and allow introductions, and that was because we really had a packed agenda and I talked too much. So this morning I'm going to talk less. I'm going to let you folks talk, but we're excited about the program we have. We have MeASBO. We have Cheryl Lane from ESEA. Cheryl and I have been talking pretty regularly over the past 2 years. Cheryl is bringing her entire team this morning, which is 7 people. So don't be shocked when they all show up. And a lot of what Cheryl and I have talked about over the past 2 years is really interconnectedness between business managers and MeASBO and ESEA staff. And so she wants to introduce her staff, let you know who is who, what region they cover, what their specialties are, so that the communication between us as business managers is who do we call. And she has had some turnover. She's had some new staff. So she'll be talking. Davy Jones will be here from MeASBO to talk about whatever topics you want to talk about. He's going to cover some basic topics on MeASBO, but go over that. And then we also have Jim Chassie. Jim we added as Jim presented at MSMA conference, if anybody went. Cybersecurity, and you're going to say, how does that affect me? I think you're going to find out this morning how it affects you. And it affects you because when the crap hits the fan and something goes down, the first thing that's going to be asked for is a whole bunch of documentation. And you're going to get local and state agencies and potentially federal agencies coming in on a cybersecurity breach and asking your insurance policy information. And I'm sure I know Deb and other agencies have that type of protection. And then what is your cyber plan and what's your cyber recovery plan? I've seen different presentations done at Tri-State ASBO as well as Jim's, and I think it's real helpful information as a foundational point. It will not answer all of your questions in 1 40-minute session. It won't. It's intended to give you a basis of information to ponder, consider, and plan. I want to thank Tom Seekins, Energy Management Consultants. Tom is the vendor sponsor for this morning and sponsored breakfast. So thank you, Tom. Our vendor sponsors really help us throughout the year. So thank you for that. So I'm going to go around. I think it's kind of hard to pass the microphone. If people can't hear, I will. But you want to start, Zach, and introduce yourself, which school district you're from, and if it's like multiple towns like me, what those cover. RSU 57, which is Alvin, Miller, Lyman, Newfield, Shapley, and Waterbury. Yes, I say that enough times, it just rolls off the tongue. Thank you all for coming. We've seen a lot of new faces over the past year or two. We've seen a lot of familiar faces. There's been a lot of outreach recently to us in regards to new people coming into the business manager roles from other industries, particularly trying to get their feet wet, trying to understand. So if you know of those people, there is a listing on the website of mentors who are willing and able to help folks, or if you're willing to help, please step up. I think it's really helpful to support people coming into this profession who don't have that background, and they're reaching out, and they are reaching out. So if you're willing to do that, please do. Please let us know. I'm going to go through just a couple of things really quickly so that we can stay on agenda. The board of directors for MeASBO. MeASBO became a 501c3 this year. It became a legitimate nonprofit organization approved by the IRS, adopted bylaws for that organization. So you should know who your board members are. They include myself, and if board members could just stand or wave. Andrea Deesh is vice president. Sherry Proctor is treasurer. Dawn Pooler is secretary. Diane Boucher, Sherry Moody, and Kelly Wentworth. So if you have an interest in participating on a committee or joining the board when that opportunity comes, please reach out, please be involved. We can use the help and certainly encourage that help and support. I want to thank the Calumet Club. I want to also thank Drummond Woodsum Conference for those of you who went, that we hosted and co-hosted with them a couple weeks ago. It was a really good day. Hopefully those of you who went found it beneficial to be out of the office for a day. And also for the collaboration with MSMA on the MSMA conference, which was their conference. We were not a co-host, but there was a lot of good education last Thursday and Friday at MSMA. So I think as I've gone into this over the past 10 years, October seems to be education month and trips to Augusta. So I decided this year I was going to recognize someone at each meeting who stands out. It doesn't mean to exclude other people, but people who have really stepped up within the organization to help be who we can be and to help all of us as business managers. I recognized a couple of people last month. This is not to exclude anybody or not to say that there aren't a lot of other people doing a ton of work. This individual is actually working behind the scenes that you will never see, and sometimes pulling her hair out, and also dealing with me, which is not always fun. So this month, I want to give recognition to Andrea Deesh from Gardner for all that she's done to support ASBO and specifically to support me as president. So thank you, Andrea. Meetings, I said at the last meeting, if you were there, we are recording this meeting to post afterwards. We did get a lot of membership response to say, hey, can you post your live meeting? So if we can't attend or we want to rehear something, we can do that. So we are doing that at this meeting, just so you know. Next meetings, live meetings, will be in February and April of this year, and that will be our round for this year. We are planning on doing Zoom meetings, 1.5 hour Zoom meetings on various topics. I know on listserv yesterday, there was a whole thread on account coding and could we coordinate something about that, or could the state coordinate something? So we take that information and try to incorporate that into some Zoom meetings. So we will be starting those, especially over the winter. Ideas for meetings, please, we're always looking for ideas. They're your meetings. What do you want to hear about? What do you want to learn about? And hopefully we can coordinate that either in a live meeting or in a Zoom meeting. So email the ASBO Gmail account. We certainly receive those. We go through them. So please give those thoughts and ideas to us. The 501c3 I mentioned briefly a few minutes ago. That is a big step for this organization. For those who have been around a while, you know how long it's been in order to get to this point. We are in the midst. We have a document put together for a job description as well as an ad for an executive director, a part-time executive director, to really support the organization. We are all volunteers, just like everyone else in this room. We do not get paid. It's our own time to help support the organization. There's a lot of work to be done, and as volunteers, we don't have that time anymore. We need to support the organization on a committee level and on a board level, but we need someone part-time to do that work. We've talked about this for 2 years now, during COVID, probably even started a little bit before COVID, and we are ready to move, and we will be moving forward. So that will be coming out. I think it's important for the organization. I think it's important for our mission. and where we're going moving forward. Any questions up to there from anybody, or any comments or questions? Okay, report out a little bit on committees. Zach, do you have anything you want to say about legislative?
Thank you for that committee member, Stacey DeVito in the back. Thank you very much. So the hope is that we can get to a point where we're able to make our own group decision on where we want to go with legislation. I found out through kind of joining and becoming the committee of one last year that we're on the tail end. Like we get what MSMA and what MSBA say, oh, we've decided this. I don't think we're in that front part. Now we're our own 501c3, so we should have our own voice. And then as a second voice, because we might not always agree 100% with the direction they're going. I think we have a lot of statements. That's where we're going. So that's my thought, and that's really touched on that with Stacey, and hopefully we'll get together and start moving forward to where we get information earlier out to the folks. And I also learned that in the legislative section, they bark out about 1,200 laws that are proposed, and filtering through and trying to get to the 40 or 50 that might mean something to us, but fun things like earned paid leave and other stuff that will come down the pipe, and then we're hit with it in the business office and the big stuff. That's my vision. Hopefully we'll get there.
Thank you, Zach. And I think the goal, especially with the executive director position, is for that position to really be the lead position for MeASBO in coordinating, communicating, and networking with all of those, whether it's MSMA and their legislative liaison and Vicky, whether it's with Drummond Woodsum, whether it's just keeping abreast, which is almost a full-time job in and of itself, as to what's coming up in the legislature and what's coming up in committees, and making sure that we as an organization of financial leaders understand what those are and can have a voice to say, here's what we need to have represented as information and how it impacts Maine schools. And I think there's no better example of that than earned paid leave. Earned paid leave went through without much trouble, and we're all living with it. And it's a nightmare, and we all know it's a nightmare, and everyone knows it's a nightmare. But we all know realistically it's here to stay because it went through committee, it went through the legislature, it went through the governor, and it got approved. And it's been approved for what, 4 years now? So that is a good example of how we as an organization need our experience and expertise to be brought forward to the forefront through a legislative process so that that information is shared. Technology and professional development committees, they're two separate committees, but have been fairly inactive. We need to get those committees going. I plead with you and those who are watching this on video and implore you to reach out by email and say, hey, I want to serve on that committee, especially if you're going to hire an executive director and I don't have to do all the legwork, but I can have an impact. Please step forward on those. Hollis and Diane are sitting next to each other, so I'll let them battle out who wants to talk about cross-state.
I'll have you one. Oh, I might not need to get the microphone. I can be a little bit loud. All right. Okay. Okay. All right. So even though the conference feels like it's really far away, in May, the Tri-State Committee has been meeting. We meet basically almost year round. We take a couple of months off in the summer, but we have been working hard to plan next year's conference. The conference next year is May 17th, 18th, and 19th, and that is in Burlington, Vermont. And it's at the same location that we've had in the last handful of years, but now it's a DoubleTree by Hilton instead of the Sheraton. But if you've been in the past, it is at that same conference center. We will be looking for suggestions for speakers and presentations. We'll like to send out a survey through MeASBO to make sure we capture everybody's ideas. So that's all we have for now, but we'll keep you posted. Thank you.
Thanks, Hollis. Any questions for Hollis or Tri-State? How many have gone to Tri-State at some point in their career? If you haven't, I would strongly encourage you. The reason it's scheduled so far ahead is because one, there's a lot of planning that goes into it, but if you're anything like me, I had to arrange my annual budget meeting, which is that same week, to a different day, so I can make sure I could attend and go. So please look at that. It is a great learning opportunity. It's a great networking opportunity. And if nothing else, Bridget will tell you it's a lot of fun time eating and drinking.
Yeah, and we give that scholarship for new people.
We do have a scholarship for new people. So if you're interested and you're a first time attendee, certainly. Thank you, Bridget, for bringing that up. Anything else in this part of the meeting? I do know we have a session at the very end where you can ask the board members anything you want or discuss or comment on anything. But before we get into the meat of this morning's learning. No? Okay, Tom Seekins, as I said, Energy Management Consultants is our vendor sponsor for this morning. Tom's going to talk about what his company does, what opportunities are available, and the type of work that his company does and how that can help your school district.
Thank you, Colin. Hello, good morning. Thanks for having me. Tom Seekins, I'm an engineering consultant. Many of you know me from nearly 20 years at Siemens. Great company, learned a lot, and regret nothing about the education I received from Siemens. During the process of running the energy group for Siemens over 20 years and attending the MeASBO, especially the Tri-State everybody for 20 years straight, it's definitely the best trade show that I've ever went to. EMC was the company that Siemens hired to do all of our LED conversions. Or hired LED, whichever brand methodology was preferred. So EMC has got a lot of experience with lighting, but as doing these projects and having EMC do all the lighting projects for us, as well as other ESCOs hiring EMC to do their lighting, their calculations, the installation, the recycling of the old toxic waste, layups and ballasts, and then maintaining the projects thereafter for the 5-year warranty on average projects. I realized during that time that there's a niche there that going into a school without necessarily a label or a brand on your shirt. You know, there's a lot of companies out there that are great, the service is great, but you still have a brand that a lot of people are kind of apprehensive to jump in bed with because you're stuck there for a long time, right? So there's the whole proprietary nature of building automation and boilers and HVAC. And so one of the really cool things about our ability to do projects is bidding out the projects for our customers. If you have an incumbent control provider or mechanical provider that you really love, great, they can absolutely be part of the process. But having gone to school board meetings for 20 years and doing a lot of them, it's pretty neat. I saw there was a need where you have relationships with vendors and the boards necessarily do not, right? So it's very difficult to explain that you want to go with XYZ company. When the boards ask, hey, if you bid this out, it's very difficult to do that in a lot of cases because schools inherently do not have the resources internally to vet out projects that are, okay, this company can definitely agree with our current system for the team. If they say they can, everyone's going to say they can. And then you jump in bed with that particular company and find out on street they can't. So then you find yourself working out controls, spending millions of dollars, and then you have that on your face, right? So I saw that a lot of times in these meetings, so it was definitely a niche where we could walk the contractors through, without the whatever measure it is, whether it's controls, boilers, HVAC, ventilation, including lighting, or ongoing. With the contractors that you enjoy the service of, or their control systems for the past 20 years or longer, but have others that are equal. It's apples to apples. We know who can integrate and who cannot. We know who can service and who cannot. We know who has a presence in a certain part of the state that who isn't. So it's lowest quality bid, not lowest bid, right? And that's an important thing. But as a consultant, not a brand, we can truly say we're agnostic when it comes to vetting out those interest for you guys. I've seen it already. It's kind of gone bananas faster than I thought it was going to. But we do have, licensed HVAC, refrigeration engineers, certified engineers, former automation and mechanical technicians that are leading the contractors through and saying, this is what we want to go with for the boiler room, this is what we want for the control platform, make sure you follow all these protocols, and then provide you guys all those bids, and show you the numbers, and let you choose based on what you would like, but also what our recommendations might be on the scope of work that we saw, or service capabilities thereafter. So it's a pretty cool place to be. It's nice to be in the consultant side of it. We're paid like a general contractor, so there's nothing thereafter that we're there for unless you want us to be, but it's to manage the project, to turn the key, and have that kind of contract between yourself and the contractors and the work. So, I actually have isolated one little thing here as a lighting measure. With all the renewable energy school money coming out, that funding opportunity notice, Efficiency Maine has a recent funding opportunity notice where they drastically increase their incentives for electrification, including everything. So some of the projects, and many of you are already working on it now in the room, many of you have already done it with your projects, but with the incentive for efficiency and utilizing some of these other grants, your or just using a lease purchase for a long funding your projects, they're literally taking themselves 100%. So it's really hard. I see it a lot where you go to a school board and the school board says that we got to start looking at energy reduction and carbon footprint reduction in our schools. But it's really hard when you go and present them millions of dollars of work and they want all the stuff and they see the price tag and say, oh, how are we going to pay this? Right. So I've isolated just lighting as a measure. It's essentially there's a hard measure that has the biggest impact as an LED program does in the classroom, based on the impact that it has in countless studies to show the attendance, students' mood and test scores. Ball State University just did a huge test on LED programs and showed drastic data on test score improvements from first grade all the way to senior high school. So a challenge to find a better measure in the classroom. It's a singular measure. We're in a school district that will have the biggest impact of the teachers, as well as all staff and students, and it pays for itself 90%. So we're not asking taxpayers to deep back into those pockets. They already think that you are, and 70% of the taxpayers, right? We're coming up with a measure that has a drastic improvement in the classroom environment that pays for itself. So this is just a project that I highlighted for the school district that we're just doing right now. It's a 6-year payback. The project is a $763,000 LED conversion with $100,000 $100,000 a year of energy and maintenance savings, and then $145,000 incentive for the utility. I chose this one from New Hampshire just so I wasn't isolated in this room, but this is a typical project. They're anywhere from 6 to 8 years, and so they're not a 20-year endeavor. And so as you can see, they pay for themselves pretty darn quick. This is essentially how it's broken down. So you see the energy and maintenance savings. There's a considerable amount of maintenance savings as well as energy, and that's a common denominator. It's not going anywhere, right? So if these things are supposed to last 65,000 hours, and the average school week is 60 hours, for life expectancy of the LED math is about 35 years, right? That's a tremendous amount of time. So if it pays for itself in 6 years, the amount of money you're able to garner over the next 10 after that is pretty considerable savings. Not to mention the carbon footprint of that. So this is just a typical amortization schedule. This one here is 8 years. This is a lease purchase, so they do it's 8 years because they give them a year of no payments. So the thought is, and many of you have done this several times, you have a whole year of no payments to start implementing the measures. In this case, it's just a lighting project. So the implementation period is around 3 to 4 months for a district of this size. So you have a whole year of no payments, but as you can see, your energy and maintenance savings is 105,000 and your payment is 99,000. That was based on a 3.9% interest rate. I know that they're going a little bit right now, but that was the most recent project that we just kind of isolated and voted on just last week. So as you can see, the debt is 100% satisfied by the savings. So it's a pretty attractive measure to present to a school board. And then of course the carbon footprint impact. Pretty neat to see when you boil it down that you could literally electrify 38 households based on 11,000 kilowatt hours a year of electricity. So just by rejecting this project, I'm just letting alone, not including the boiler, not including other foundation metals to include. It's a pretty serious impact on the environment as well. So it's a really good thing to go back to the district with, hey, we have a project that will have a crazy impact on stuff, but having someone that can actually organize the bids, put it all together for you, manage the process that does not have a brand or a government by an agenda or a bunch of service. Again, if the economics are great, then you must keep it that way, but if you go back to the board and say, these are fair and balanced bids, we vetted all this out, the third party consultant that knows this business. So we feel strongly on the bid that we're moving forward with. And it kind of eliminates a lot of those questions from the board that we see in presenting projects. So it's almost impossible to find something that is great as $9 million project for schools. It's insane. That's about it. Any questions? Right? Thank you.
Yeah, thanks for the information. I know our district just finished a project about a year ago, a 5-year project. That was pretty intensive. It does save a lot. And I know it is helpful to have people along your side to help you through that, so. Next is Dave Jones from Nov4. You want to introduce yourself?
Hi everyone. I see some faces I know and some new faces. That's always good. It's been 3 years I've been locked up in quarantine, so it's nice to be able to see you again. My name is David Jones. I was formerly the teacher specialist at Nov4. I'm actually switching over to the PLD plan role slowly but surely. And Alex Grant is going to be coming in. I just want to mention that at the top for you because we will have some follow-ups from today. He very well may end up talking with Alex as well. So I'll still be there. I'm around if I'm available with an email for you. But he's going to be helping out as well. What I'm going to cover today, well, he's going to set up time for me. Thank you, we're going to start with kind of some of the basic building blocks of Nov4. I was told save us money, which that was a much better presentation on saving money. It was more impressive. But the times where money issues come for us is membership being misreported or earning compensation, the money that should have been reported to us being incorrect. So we're going to cover some of those. And we're also going to get into one of the next big sections where I get lots of questions and comments and concerns, which is the patient safety as well. Lastly, the main focus of the presentation is going to be on the teacher plan itself. But I assumed if I was in this room, a few of you at least will also have responsibilities for participating in the district plan. I see some nods, so that's a good assumption. And so I'm going to make a few comments as we go through where there's key differences between those plans. You want to know you're paying attention to your matching out for. So if technology will catch up then, thank you for putting the work for me there.
Which it's not.
Never is. And I will leave some time for questions at the end, but if anyone has a burning question right now, I'll use the time to answer it. And that's a good sign. Once already has an agenda on me, that's good. Thank you very much. All right, so now we get to look at the agenda and see what I forgot to mention. I said we'd talk about membership eligibility. I said we'd cover earnable compensation, what you paid, that should be reported or not, invitations. What a pretty quickly there. All right, so starting with teacher plan membership eligibility. Teacher plan membership eligibility is mandatory if the individual is in a position for which the Department of Education requires certification, and the individual holds that certification. That's going to take care of the bulk of the school. Classroom, teachers, principals, assistant principals, superintendents. But there's then a default which says, nice. There's then a kind of catch-all that says, well, if certification wasn't required or held, If the position still has the principal function of introducing new learning to students, then that position can be covered as well. So if you have someone who's not certified, but is still teaching children, that position can still be covered. Now, principal function is a nice soft term that you put in the law there. So if you're not sure whether it would be covered or not, feel free to send us the job description. We'd be glad to evaluate that for you. And then lastly, kind of the exception out there is grandfather positions. Grandfathering provisions go back to 1988, 89, so it's not going to be common at this point in time for most of you. But the reason I mentioned it is because somebody could have been grandfathered, you don't want to just assume that the person that replaces them is also going to be covered by the plan. You want to make sure you're still thinking about certification or whether they're introducing new learning stimulus. That's when you assume it's going to be the same outcome. That's when we see problems arise and then the initial report. All right, so optional membership. MeASBO teacher plan membership is mandatory when they meet those statutory definitions we just talked about. The exception to that in the teacher plan is substitutes have optional membership. The only position in the teacher plan that has that luxury. So your sub should be offered a one-time election when they join the plan to join or not. When they do so, that election is for eternity. So if they choose with you now, when they leave and come back 20 years later, that election still stands, whether they choose to join or decline. Then one last caution point for you on this is if you do have that participating local district and you have optional membership with your district, that decision can affect both sides of the house. So maybe they're just declining as a substitute, but then next year they maybe take over and say janitor position that's full time, and let's say there's as optional membership, they could have already declined that, not even with the control. So it's important when you're administering elections to your employees, they understand if you are the same employer in your district, that it will affect both sides of the house and vice versa. Lastly, optional membership only affects positions with optional membership. If that's not nice and redundant. That means if they go from an optional position, such as substitute, and they decline, and then they move to a mandatory position, like a classical teacher, they still are required to participate. So optional positions will be turned down. Yes, a question, please. I love questions. Throw them out. Please, I love it. So I'm going to summarize the question to, we're hiring a bunch of people that are kind of subs, kind of ed tech ones. How do we administer them? You call me and ask me that, I'm going to say, you need to tell me whether we're talking about a substitute or an ed tech one or a substitute for an ed tech. That's going to unravel the answer. If they are a substitute for a classroom teacher, optional members should say we talked about it. If they're real, when the district has to say what they are in Ed one is not covered by any first teacher plan membership. You have POP plan membership. Okay, that easier. All right. So then if they're a really Ed one, no option. And one last sprinkle, if they're subbing for an Ed 1 position, then it's not something that they need first. They're not seen as a sub, make them the option. So the answer to your question will all depend on how we classify them. You'll ultimately say is the person really a sub or an Ed 1 or a sub or a sub. Does that make sense?
Yes, you know, I just.
So I'll summarize this by saying, if you classify them as a sub, then you can offer them, you can offer them unless there's something for that type one. Right, so if they're a sub, like long-term sub, not truly or type one, that's covering the classification activities, not certified yet, then you can certainly. It all comes down to how you classify them. And we don't have a stake in that fight, right? Like, I'm thank you for sharing that perspective. That's going to be something we're going to turn to and say, really, which position are we working? And then we really do this chart to solve how it is. Exactly. So yes, it is a sticky situation. Good luck with it. All right. I invented this office. No worries. So I just coined this term, situational membership. It's not really mandatory membership, and it's not really optional membership, but there's a couple of times where the circumstances will dictate whether that person is contributing to the first or not. Right there, YouTube for popular sounds good. So when I'm talking about situational membership, I'm thinking of coaching primarily, but also adults. Touch base on coaching is a sticky wicket, is what I'm going to call it right now. So I wanted to cover it specifically. When we're talking about coaching, the situation is we're going to say if they have a basis for membership, then that coach will contribute to the main person plan. And when we say basis, what we're really saying is that person has previously or currently contributed to the main first teacher or state plan, and those funds remain on the account. If that's the situation for that individual, they're required to contribute on the coaching requirements to the main first teacher plan. Now, if they don't have that basis, they're excluded from contributing to the first teacher plan. Now, for a lot of your coaches, you'll already sort of know that answer. They're the 8th grade science teacher and their soccer coach. You know that person has a basis for also. But keep in mind that basis could have been with another district, an employer, it could have been years ago. Now, your employees in an ideal world would be a great source to ask you to say, have you ever worked in the main first teacher plan before? And they'll tell you the straight face no. And when you call me, I'll look and see 10 years of contributing on my screen. So if you're not sure what their work history and situation is, you can always reach out and contact us. We can have that basis for them. There is a question. Love the question. The question was, is there a way for us to know without having to call? If not, who do we call? Love the question. There is not a way employer social services doesn't offer a correct answer. You can always call your employer reporting contact, or you can just contact us at Community Department Services. All right, adult ed is the other one that I'm going to call situationally dependent. And again, this is a tricky spot for people because it changes from person to person and it's off. So when we're talking about, again, basis applies to adult ed. So if they have contributing or currently or previously involved and they're an adult ed teacher, they're going to be covered regardless of what content of that adult ed teaching course is. If they don't have that basis, if they don't have that basis, then we look at what content is. And if that content requires them to be certified to teach it, then they're still covered, because remember at the top, we said teacher plan membership is mandatory. Anytime the Department of Education requires certification, and certification is held. So we typically see that experience through the Department of Education when it's for the credit, right? So GED or ISEC, like those binding, that would get them the adult teaching this. And then lastly, the converse of that, if you don't have a basis, teaching, of course, it's not for credit, teaching dog walking, crocheting, all those fun ones, that's not what we can do. Now, here is where I said I would touch base a little bit on PLD plan membership. PLD plan membership is a completely different beast than teacher plan. Sorry, I forgot what that was called there for a minute. That's because each district sets their membership rules if they've chosen to participate in the PLD plan. So it will vary from each school district. There's no common answer. Whereas for the teacher plan, it's set by state law and common across the board. Now, it's important to note, if you have a PLD plan, membership is always first evaluated under the teacher plan, since it's set by state law. And then if the position doesn't qualify under the teacher plan criteria that is looked at that point, we would then evaluate to see if it can be covered by your PLD plan. And then lastly, your PLD plan membership can be set up to be either optional or mandatory. And again, it's going to vary from district to district. So if you have that plan and you're not sure what those requirements are, contact us. Feel free to reach out to me after. We can provide that layout for what the requirements are. All right. I also was asked to say anything that was hot, new, and exciting. And in the PLD world, open enrollment is hot, new, and exciting. So and again, PLD is very customized district to district. So not all school districts adopted this when it came out, but PLD districts under a new law were given the opportunity to provide open enrollment to their PLD plan employees. So when we talk about substitutes and declining optional membership in the teacher plan, we said it's one time forevermore. Well, the open enrollment period for schools who adopted now allows members who initially apply to have up to 5 years to join in the plan after they initially apply. If your school district did choose to join into that, then their open enrollment allows them to contribute, but it's on an after-tax basis. So if they had initially declined, later come in, that's going to be a big difference for people who didn't take it right at that. They take it ahead of time, it's pre-tax, just like always. They come in under the enrollment after they decline in the PLD world. That's going to be different tax treatment for them. So that would be fun for you to all administer. Hopefully, the payroll processors have gotten up there today. Yes, please. For buying back time that they had not contributed, it stumped me. At the top, I will say I started as the teacher plan for the last decade and I'm new to the PLD plan. I will look that up. If you catch me after I'll grab you know that specific. I don't want to say anything about it. I have a guess, but I don't want to be a problem. So thank you. I appreciate being studied. Yeah, please question. Yes, I think what you're saying is true, and I'm going to clarify it a bit. So the question is, I have a 218 agreement with Social Security. Is that what allows us to have it? If you have a PLD, you have a 218 agreement, what that means is your district will have optional PLD plan membership. So that's what the 218 agreement is really defined. Not all districts who have a PLD have that 218 agreement or optional membership. So it's That's kind of new ones. That makes sense? That is another question I'm going to go as stumped on. In terms of that, if you see me after, I'm going to connect with Quinn Collins, Social Security Administrator for the state of Maine, who works out of our office. But I think he can help answer what that process would be like. Correct. So substitute teaching can be completely separate than the field membership has to be just look at on its own. Option for the teachers that are during this kind of process. So again, feel these similarly in that it varies. It's going to be situationally dependent on whether your district on your district structure. You can have your district be the same employer, in which case, yes, the decline translates over to the east side. But you can also have your structure set up so that you're not treated as the same employer, and therefore it wouldn't. What you really want to be looking at, the employer identification number or TIN are typically a sign of that, but not the only factor. If you're unsure, check with your employer reporting contact and make sure you know it will affect both sides. Right? All right, earnable compensation. So we just covered who should or shouldn't be in the plan. Then it becomes what should we actually report to Maine first with contributions withheld or not. All right, so these are kind of just some of the most basics of basics. If they're regular wages for working in the position that we just said was Maine first covered, of course, whether they're hourly, contract, daily. Workers' compensation, that is a sticky spot for employers. Different school districts administer this differently. Some will take checks from workers' comp, run them through the payroll. They're still sending contributions to us. That's great. It's earnable comp. That money's on account for earning service credit. Some districts, though, never touch those checks. They would go straight to the employee, nothing goes through the payroll at all. That is still potentially earnable compensation, and our employees can actually make those contributions directly to us. So if someone is out on workers' compensation, we are not processing it. It would be a nice thing when it ends up. We recorded the PSC form telling us that they went out on leave. We would, of course, also notify them of good information for you to ask for protected. Retroactive payments, if you do end up making retroactive payments, this bargaining took a year or two, that's going to be earnable compensation, whether it's paid. We asked if you can send us the information of the breakdown of earnings and which year it is applied to, so we can help reallocate it to whatever it has to be maximum possible. Longevity payments also can be different from district to district and how they're administered. They are going to be earnable compensation and reported to us when they're ongoing. So if it's you reach 10 years and you're going to get another $2,000 each year thereafter, that's earnable. It's if they're done on a one-time lump sum and done. So if you reach 10 years, here's $500, but then the next year they don't get everything, that would be treated as a bonus. Overtime pay, again, that's maybe more in the PLP world, but if you have overtime pay available, that's earnable. Same with shift differential pay. So if the PLP night janitor is making another $1 an hour, that's treated as compensation as well. Last one on there, tax sheltered annuities. Tax sheltered annuities are earnable compensation as long as they aren't having strings attached or being paid in lieu of some other benefit. So if it's typically an administrator contract. If you say we have a $100,000 salary, plus we pay $5,000 to tax sheltered individuals. Those strings attached, earnable compensation. What I encourage you to watch out for is when they start putting conditions. Well, we match up to 3%. There's a matching element. Or you have a choice between maybe life insurance or paying to tax sheltered. Then it's really keep that in mind, please. Some common examples of, yes, please. Yeah, so the lump sum nature of it is still earning compensation, so we would want to report that amount to us so that they get the maximum benefit calculated. So it would go through your employer payroll reporting, just like usual. And if anyone wants to suggest how they work it in there, I know some employers work it in there. Yes, please. Yeah, so I'm gonna try my best to repeat what was kindly explained for me, which is basically on the payroll report, which I assume most of the other. So if I follow, and please correct me if I'm wrong, this is going on the record now. You have the kind of initial payroll report that shows the regular salary. You know that person also made this payroll report at an additional $400. So you're going in, adding that additional compensation, calculating the additional contributions as well, so that it's on the payroll reports. I'm giving nods across, but I think I captured that. Yeah, so I am smart enough to know that if there is a dispute, the details probably matter. So I interdict, pitch me after we'll touch base and I'll look at the details of what exactly is happening to see why there was a discrepancy. Because last thing I want to do is make an assumption of what I think your disability payments are about versus what they actually are. So I don't mean to punch except for lessons are learned when you try to shoot them today. Thank you. All right, so some common examples of things that you should be expecting to exclude, expense reimbursement. So if someone's getting reimbursed for something they paid out of pocket, that's not earnable compensation. Any allowances, if you have a vehicle, technology, phones, you don't want to take contributions on those. Payments for sick leave bank or donated accruals. That is probably one of the big ones that I bring the bell on to catch your attention there. When someone's using their own sick time, that's still earning compensation. Sorry, when they switch over to the donated sick bank, it's not. And that will always cause questions on our own. So it's going to be helpful for you if when that happens, make a note in that file somewhere. This was the day, circulate, because inevitably, a lot of times these cases end up in disability files that we just generally still compensation is calculated for that year, and neighbors will always have all the conversations and questions there. So please do keep track of what they saw. Only go to the bank with your life consider costs. All right, bonus payments including for improvement and retention. I used to laugh when we said bonus in the future plan world if ever existed. Those are becoming more popular in the climate. So just make sure that's on your radar. Feel free to pay them, just don't take the time and contributions on them. Cash paid in lieu of benefits. A lot of these districts will say, well, if you don't take health insurance with the district, we'll give you a couple $1,000 cash in your pocket. You wouldn't want to take contributions after that. And then lastly, vacation or sick leave payments that are paid out anytime prior to being retired. So some districts will say at the end of the school year, we'll buy back 2 unused paid days, things of that nature. That's not a payout at retirement. That's not. Stipends. There's went back and forth whether to even put this slide on. Stipends are maybe the nightmare of it because the answer can be yes or no, and it depends. There are then some common core elements that will save in without coaching, as we discussed before. I'll add it, but that would include co-curricular non-athletics. So, chess club advisor, you can decide if they're for yourself, but they are for this training that's set. If they were a department head or a team lead, have those that still covers further teaching job is what we call it there. Curriculum work, works becoming certified as a teacher, that work is already covered in the. Then we start getting into natural extensions, which that's kind of one of these fuzzy things we do, which is if the job is such that we would expect a teacher or administrator to do that work, we would allow it. That's going to be very situation dependent based on what their job is and what stuff is being paid. It's probably so the key takeaway: contact retirement services. If you have one where they're not student focused anymore, that's a good sign. You probably want to check in with us to see if you would allow it to. All right, vacation and sick leave. We're on the home stretch now. Vacation and sick leave. I kind of wish this conference was in May, so you would all remember this. But if you can, stay with me. Hopefully, we'll stick around for you to come in school. Vacation and sick leave. I kind of want to start on the member side. What happens for them? When we're talking about payouts at retirement, we're talking about your employer paid payments based on your district's contract, whatever you do and allow. In the teacher plan, up to 30 days at the per diem rate, in the earnable compensation, the member is in the age 60 plan and the age 60 plan. To have been in the age 60 plan in the teacher plan, they had to have 10 years of service credit by June 30th of 1993. Now, I'm going to predict the question, which is no, there is not a spot where the audience needs information. Sometimes you'll know from the work history in the district, but you can always contact us. Sure. If they're not in the 60 plan, if they're in 62 or 65 plan, that means not earning compensation. So the other side of it for your employees, we also grant additional service credit on any unused unpaid days. So maybe they had 120 leave when they go to retire. This cash amount would be 30 days. That would be the left unused unpaid days. We'll give them additional service credit, so that's why we ask about how many days they have. The service credit that is available to them is prorated, so every day up to 9 does help them get a little bit more service. And unlike the paid days, which is limited to members of the 60 plan, that unused unpaid days benefits all teacher plan members, 60, 62, 65. So that's why they pull the data from you, even if they're not in the 60 plan. All right. Yes, please. So the 90 aren't going to count as earnable compensation, it's going to get service credit. Does that make sense? Paid days are earnable compensation, and they increase that member's high 3-year average, which flows for their calculation. Unpaid days help increase service credit, the other factor in the calculation to help increase the retirement. That distinction makes sense? Great, thank you.
Yeah. Yes, we know, someone has 30 days on the vote, given very good hire. And then, that's when you would choose to get paid for the 30 days, or leave those 30 days complete their longevity, but it can't be both. Because we pay them for them, that often goes.
Correct. So if your district would allow them to project the payment, that's no problem to us. I would say I have not ever mathematically seen a situation where it was worth turning down cash up front. Not saying it's not possible, but it's a little required customer service credit. Years kind of thing. All right, so this is again a spot I wanted to highlight for our PLD plan members here, just real briefly, because it is different than the teacher plan moves. You don't want to get caught in the trap of thinking that 60 plans, 65 plan in the PLD world. It's actually now looks at whether they have 20 or more years of service credit in the PLD consolidated plan. And that's a few years old now at this point, but it's still relatively new, so I did want to highlight. A challenge for that too, again, it's not a resource for you to local for itself through the SS. And of course, it's changing year after year. The person who didn't have 20 years this year might next year. So if you're uncertain, you can always reach out and call back. I'm going to throw out one last quick tidbit on this, which is some of you may have started seeing credits showing up on your ESS. They have now made it so that if you withheld on someone and it was not earnable compensation, credit showing up on your employer below that might used to be the case. So that's a new thing that a lot of people are seeing and asking questions about. The seed action loss that variable could be why or not right age plan or feel people not meeting this service credit. All right. What was my time for today? 5 minutes, thank you, appreciate it. All right, I'll go through this real quick, because again, it will matter more, call us as we go over more time. The vacation sick leave reporting form has probably the most questions of any of the forms we're offering. There's a couple things I want to highlight here for you. First, it asks for the date of the last paycheck. We want to know when they're going to stop paying out anything to them with contributions with health or not. We realize sometimes there's a timing discrepancy between when the sick leave is paid out and the final payroll is paid out. Some school districts will do that sick payment in June and continue regular payrolls through July and onwards. I promise you, it's okay to put the August date on there to let us know when that last payroll is coming in, and still list the vacation or sick leave payments that you issued in June. We know that's possible. We shouldn't be bugging you. Hit someone bugging you about that, but I'm straight in the money. Next, vacation and sick leave pay lines there. We're looking for you to report the payments that you paid and with telling contributions on those lines. You paid it and you didn't withhold contributions because you had already identified it's not earnable for them. Kind of have two options. One, we can tuck it into the box to the side that says we paid it, we didn't withhold contributions because it was in excess of 30 days. We'll understand that. Or what a lot of districts do, which I really like, so we sit under other pay and other payments, you have that common field there, and you just put W/O name without contributions, and that lets us know you paid it and you knew not to pay it. Last spot that's really confusing on this that I want to highlight here is we ask for the accrued leave information before you have to choose that payment. And that goes back to what we were talking about before for the unused unpaid payments. They had 120 to start, and you paid them out for 30 days. You want to put the 120 days out there. If you deduct the 30 and tell us they had 90 left, we're going to say, well, there's 90 days. We know they paid them out for 30. They only have 60 left on unused unpaid, and we're not going to grant them as much service credit as we did in the title. So I know it comes after the payments on the form, so it kind of walks our brains the other way, but please do know that it's really what before the payments. And then the last thing on there is how many days are prescribed for that employee. what that's really trying to get at is further position what this forward from. Are they 180 days, 181, 182? Really common that the first will last coming soon. Things in each year, so it's there all the time. But we're really trying to figure out how many days is when the time is for. So those are like the key elements for the processes in June. Of course, if you have questions, you have. That said, I'd be right up against the time, but if there's any last general questions and answers, I'd love to. Yes, please. So the question was, how long before someone's going to retire should they reach out for I'm going to say first, you always welcome them throughout their career, checking in, asking questions, learning, making good decisions. When we start to move 5 years out, that's when we really say, boy, if you're having that, it's really worth attending one of our presentations to start hearing, learning, thinking a bit more as we plan and think about it. But bottom line, kind of gold standard last minute is at least 1 year. When they're within a year of either in service or age, we encourage them to contact us. What's the estimate? That gives us time to process it. It gives us time to ask you questions if there's any concerns, and for them to get the information. So 1 year is kind of the last answer, and we'll spend time. All right. Well, thank you all for having me. I appreciate it. And those of you who I know I owe a couple answers to, if I can pick you after, I'll grab their emails and chip you get up. Thanks so much.
Report about anything we got time. Couple people came in a little bit after we started. Is there anyone who came in? I know we have Nov4 from MSMA. Raise your hand, wave, so people know who you are. Anyone else come in that didn't get introduced? Thank you, Karen. Anyone else who came in that didn't get a chance to introduce themselves? Was Dave's presentation worth your time and energy? Would you like to hear more at some point? I'm seeing some nods. Thumbs up if yes. Thumbs down if no. Thank you. That information is really helpful for us. I'm not trying to put people on the spot. I'm not trying to be positive or negative about speakers. It just gives us insight at the board level about, we don't want to repeat the same information over and over, but if there's more information and you feel it would have been helpful to have more time, we certainly can do that either in a live meeting or in a Zoom meeting. I do want to thank folks who come from state agencies and from MSMA and other organizations. Andrew Scoggin Bank, appreciate you being here. These folks come just like us and take time out of their schedules and what's on their desk to network and be here with us. We know how valuable that is, and we appreciate your time and your energy to do that. So, Deb, Nita, Karen, Jason, thank you. We really appreciate that ability to connect with you, talk to you, and get to know you some and to ask questions. So we really appreciate that. Another individual I met, Jim Chassie, is here to talk from an MLTI perspective. I'll let you introduce yourself about your expertise and what you bring. But we're going to talk about cyber, and the reason we put this on the agenda is to really let you start to build a foundation. Maybe you have already. Maybe this is not a presentation that is going to provide a lot to you. I know it's provided a lot to me when I've heard this last week, when I heard presenters at Tri-State MeASBO talk about cybersecurity. And I drove back home and realized I'm behind the 8 ball of my shop. And I continue to be behind the 8 ball. And I think probably until I retire, I will be. So how do I overcome that frustration of the cyber risk to our district and mitigating that risk as much as possible? Knowing that people out doing bad things in the cyber world are continuing to be a step ahead of us. How do we manage that the best we can? And what risk financially, insurance and otherwise does that present to our IT folks and to our business office? So with that, I'll let Jim go from here. Please feel free to ask questions as well and give thoughts. So without further ado, Jim Chassie.
Thank you. Thanks. Hold the applause, please, that was a joke. Hey, at least if it's supposed to be entertaining, a little bit, if you don't get anything out of this, but I think you will. My name is Jim Chassie with Quick History Meeting in how I'm here. I was a teacher and coach many years ago, and I became the technology director in a small school combined. I became an elementary principal after that, and then I went to high school level years until my business manager at the high school drove me out. She was just like, oh, it was Lynn, come on, Lynn Gray. I knew there'd be somebody, I've been like a traveling administrator, and it's just kind of been a blessing really to a lot of people that I've known. But hey, you folks are amazing. Jen Soper, you might know, I worked with her before. I was a regional superintendent. Like you were transitioning, retiring business manager there. So you folks hold it together. I just applaud you. I think when a superintendent comes in, and if you've been in your role for 10 years, maybe you've had 3 or 4 or 5 or 12 superintendents, I don't know, sometimes for the steady and sometimes for the yearly now. So it becomes you that's there keeping the steady. And we know as soon as the soup comes in, it's like, hey, what's the fund balance and how good is the business manager? Because the business manager, the business manager and the IT director, keys to the kingdom, which is awesome. Don't let it go to heaven. It's awesome. But it's just a responsibility. What we did during the pandemic, we had all those CRF and all of the funds and the additional work. Kudos to you. If they didn't give you some sort of massive pay bonus, they should have. And in fact, I can't quite give you pay, but I have a little game in a few minutes, and I have some chocolate for somebody who can answer a question. Okay, a new chocolate. So I have 4 daughters, and my wife is like that teacher. And I can't escape it as I look around the room. It's just have this surroundings with the fact that you know that means. Thank you for all of you. It's amazing. So let me move on. I just wanted to say that before I go. My role at the DOE is to bring together superintendent, principals, IT directors, federal to state to local. This new, I call it the tech boom, districts through devices galore. More devices, more internet of things. Everything's online. The HVAC, right? The HVAC you control, it's on the internet. You control it from home and turn the heat up and you don't even come like it. Let's go. It's amazing what is going on in technology. The federal government is up its game, lead broadband coalition. We're in the middle of kind of tech boom, which is awesome. And I was able to bring the 2 districts to one-to-one technology. It used to be a novelty. Kind of cool, one-to-one. Now it's like, where's my device? It's the norm. Everybody has to have a device, phone device, and so the change has been astronomical in a short period of time. All right, here we go. There are a couple of streaming things in here, so hopefully the internet will. I don't know how strong it is here, but I have to connect to my presentation. So let me do that. Be patient. We used to do this. Who used this when they were younger? And then the thing that comes after that is What's the next word? You've got it. You've got mail. So we have come a long way, but right to the game, if any of you are EP and are there acronyms in the business world? Throw out some acronyms and what it is. Okay, so somebody just blurt out a couple of these if you know them. She's on the LAN right in the middle of the yellow local area network. What's your name? Sherry Moody. If you get two more, the chocolate is yours. Two more off the list. So the LAN also has a WAN. So you have a local area network. A wide area network, and you know that when you get on the the World Wide Web, some of those are pretty easy. Point to point. We say these things all the time. Do you have a USB drive? What does USB mean? We do it all the time. The technology director, people types, they speak in this language like all day long. So sometimes you have to slow them down and see what we're talking about. The one up top there, MDM, mobile device manager, CSV files. You know those from separated value, use all those things in short to degree. The text message, the simple message system, something like that. Anyways, I just wanted to show this screen and so we have come a long way. I thought it was so cool when I had my Discman. And I could go out for a job with my Discman and wouldn't put stay on the CD, but you could still use it on the track. In the top right, so many of these have been broken in schools. The back of the Apple computer, we have a plug those into a flat modem. The Nokia phone over here was indestructible. At least I still had it. I've had all of these. The Palm Pilot, the Shuffle is great for the music. The typewriter in the middle, well, the Apple IIe up there, I wrote my first curriculum on Apple IIe. You put it in one side, you boot it up, take out the floppy, turn it over, put it in again, and then you can use what's the software? Apple Works. That's what it was then. So I was able to write a curriculum with that. The keyboard in the typewriter in the middle. When I was in high school to play sports, so I thought with the high school brain I had. And I took a blow-off class. Hey, you see the blow-off classes. They won't let me have early release. And that's like the typing, right? And little did I know, there was a lot of typing. I don't know, maybe I can get 16. So little did I know that blow-off class, you're probably the rest of the video as technology came to be. And then I also added the phone thing, when you had that piece of furniture that had everything in it in your living room. Those were the coolest things. And so it's true with all the technology that's been in school districts, from the Commodore, the Tandy TRS-80, the IBM 286 and 386. The funky looking when Apple put this thing out at the top, and it was so brilliant of them, so schooly, Can you see billions of those in elementary schools? That's the Apple eMac and the Apple Mac Plus below. We've come a long way in a short period of time. All right, here you go. Hear it?
essentially in that sense, and then fraction. So because this, I don't think anybody knows who's Russia. You have no idea what's bad, but it's still made. So I'm all trying to pay on the Facebook because people know it's getting higher. That information becomes pretty faster than that. It's very sophisticated. That's what really but we're not prepared.
If you're looking for something to do over the weekend, this is a great documentary to watch. Highly recommend it. And we're gonna talk a little bit how schools are part of the federal system of infrastructure, the key components of infrastructure, and what the federal government's doing around cybersecurity. So the outcomes for the rest of this time today was just to have a better understanding of cybersecurity and how it is a team effort. And I know from my superintendent, the central office is very influential. So if you can set a standard, you can set an example, and influence the schools, and be very helpful to IT directors who are spinning more plates than you can imagine. And I'll talk about that in a bit. So I'm taking this from an angle of what are the pieces to put together of a cyber puzzle. You see AI there, you'll see the 75-degree nest in your house now, and it's connected to the internet that present potential vulnerabilities. Where I live, I use Starlink because it's the only internet I can have, and there's some fiber optic cable in there on the bottom. So pieces of the puzzle that I'm going to talk about are local control. What can you do locally? What is the E-rate thing? Who administers it? What's it all about? That we really short and slow to do up on E-rate, but I'm not positive. Insurances, municipal management insurance trust, the network, Maine network, University of Maine, the internet service provider for 95% of the schools. The legal and policy implications or laws, rules, policy that affect cyber. The MLTI program and the Maine Connectivity Authority, which is the Governor's Commission for broadband and 65 billion US funds to states for high-speed internet for all students. One of the things that happened during the pandemic, which I think as a superintendent really quickly, was the accessibility of having quality across the board. We needed high-speed internet, but not every can have it. Needed to be able to it was a great challenge. And so to take an IT director, to say the IT director, there's an extra $1,000 getting online like this to do this and do that. Be able to the off education, the amount of work that they have to produce. So first, to get into some of the legal sides of cyber and schools, you're probably aware of these laws. You know, FERPA, I'm sure you're aware of the COPA, which is the Privacy Act, student data privacy. SIPA, which is the Internet Protection Act, requiring schools to filter and some communications with parents. Bullying laws, which include cyber bullying. The broadband law was put into effect. It's going on in Maine right now with premium choice broadband expanding up into Rockwood, Maine. So the people in Rockwood now have high-speed power, which is great. And reaching every little first mile, middle mile, and last mile of the state. The Digital Equity Act is a rehabilitation act, you know, requiring you to have your websites accessible through the ADA. Districts have different policies, but most of them fall underneath student and staff use, computer use, internet use. how updated those are, varies community to community. Some of them also have policy around community use and network access. I'm thinking of a high school with 800 students. They come in the morning, 95% of them have a cell phone, it's before the lockdown, and they're on their phone. Is it their data they're on? Is it their Wi-Fi they're on? What are the school rules? Somebody on this thing. What do we allow? What do we not allow? What are they selling to each other? Why don't they just talk to each other? Or maybe they are. I covered a lunch meeting in this situation, and this is high school. Yeah. They were sending pictures over the floor of snacks. They were allowed to do their phone in the room. You want to try it? So anyways, and then local rule, kind of what we're talking about, in your student handbooks, acceptable use policies, social media policy, take on rule policy, cell phones, etc. Most places have given up on the game of stopping everything and digital citizenship. That's my footprint in my slide. There's probably more than just their curriculum in that domain. So Network Maine is part of a collaborative research collaborative with educational networks all over the country. Our pipeline comes out of Southern New England. And if you didn't know this, because not every school district, it surprises me, has MSLN or Network Maine as their internet service provider. Approximately 950 schools and libraries statewide. MSLN is paid for a combination of funds from E-rate. So Network Maine compiles everybody as one application. And for law, that Network Maine is amazing. And the Maine Telecommunications Fund is the other 40% of the dollars. And there are a few schools not using Network Maine. They're in the process of looking at the funding and construction of the new east-west highway, which will be less controversial than the physical one. If you looked at your cell phone right now, you could go under your preferences or system data, look up your data, and it will tell you how much data you're using this particular pay period of monthly data use. The average for smartphones across the world, according to this, is 11.14 gigabytes per month consumption. Way down there on the left is 2016, and way on the right is 2021. And there shows absolutely no sign of decline in exponential growth in traffic. So it's here to stay. Although I have a cabinet of rules and packets to make. I could go there and throw away all technology, but it's not really. It's amazing, but it can be a double-edged sword, as you know. And my score up there was like 200 gigabytes, so I helped the curve out in that direction. I'm kind of a data junkie. I hog the data. Network Maine also allows you to assign IP ranges. They have a tool. Sometimes that's done at the local level. When we get to the local 207, I'll explain that a little bit. But basically, this particular example of the library, we have an IP address, which is unique to every computer. This particular IP address would be public facing. Public facing is probably a security. You have to be aware it's public facing, meaning it's not behind like a particular firewall, or it is reachable. So if I ping this number on my laptop, it will come up and I'd have quicker access. And we'll get into that kind of layered security that schools should be doing. If you handle E-rate out of central office or your tech person does it, the interesting thing about Maine is Southern Maine might have an IT director sitting at 4 E-raters and 5 others.
we might be able to afford that scale. As you go up to 95 floor where it's spread out. And IT director might also teach one class, put on the third one rail and have these. So it varies across our experience significantly. So one of the things we try to do is, bring out equity or lower level ocean here that can be done. One resource is Network Maine will help with E-rate. I can recommend consultants, people hire out for all the great people work to try to do it in-house. The first round of E-rate many years ago was like intermediate taxes. The process is better than it used to be. But they provide this resource to schools. And as you may or may not know, E-rate will divide things into two categories. It used to come with farm bills, that do that anymore. And if it fits in the category, you're planning out a project for your infrastructure of your building. These are some of the things that would be covered at the rate that you receive percent reimbursement for the rate based on your student lunch payment. Okay, MLTI. Senator King and Governor King was key component to the laptop program we used to call it. Now we call it learning through technology because it's much more than 7th and 8th grade doing laptops. As you know, we got 6th grade and 9th grade. I guess we choose one or two. But it really has become an opportunity for educators to be better prepared for professional development to integrate into technology into their curriculum. We recently, the governor used federal funds to put a computer science class, one part where we use students in the school. So it's a push towards computer science. The results of the future connected to something digital. Something like 700,000 open in cybersecurity businesses in the country right now. We do the student conference each year. Last year it was virtual. We had about 6,000 students that participated across the state. And it's funny, it's I still have some PTSD from school level, but it's starting to become clear to me that these people are really probably maximum. There are some in the area of technology. So 6,000 students did not go to the University of Maine because of theirs. This we're discussing maybe to do a dual way to do that, but our participation was up for that particular event. We're in the second year of the current devices, and we're putting together an RFP for the next round of MLTI. It used to be mostly one product line, and that changed a few years ago. We track across the state, okay, what the schools put in the 7th and 8th grade. So MLTI is sort of like a, I don't know, gold standard, or we're able to see, okay, everybody buys this amount of Chromebooks and distribute across the state like this. And that probably means they're using Chromebooks across the K-12, which can help us target professional development. And then there's the Apple product and PC products. Another huge piece, growing piece, coming upon us rapidly, is cyber insurance, which is it's huge. If you don't have it, I highly recommend it. Your municipal, I don't know about that. The high school management insurance trust, I think they have maybe 100 school districts. Cyber was one of the options to that for this cyber. They will go to bid for cyber coverage, and a couple of things. Anyways, I think where this is heading is definitely towards the requirement side.
But this is what they're looking for IT departments to be able to do as a condition of the coverage, or at the very least, as the guideline to be covered. And that's your email security, internal security, multi-factor authentication. How many are using that now? Okay. That's the, you have to link your phone, sign in, you need to get your email, go to the next level. Multi-factor authentication. That alone stops about 80% of all cyber actors. Multi-factor. It's probably, if it's not there already, it'll be required of you eventually, I think. Backup and recovery policies. Redundancy is huge. Ransomware prevention measures, student data privacy, cyber incident response plans, tabletop exercises, like a fire drill for cyber. So we moved ADS to New Visions in my last job, and it wasn't easy. We've been there, done that. We took a lot, right? The vision is heading towards the cloud, requiring moving towards the cloud, student data towards the cloud. What server does students raise the system? For example, is it local in the back of the cloud somewhere, or are you using the Power Students Cloud? These are all things to think about and components to have in your overall technology plan. Tabletop exercises. If you went down today, you had no power. How are you going to pay your people? It's payroll on a Thursday. You run through those exercises. What do you do? You just have a fire. Just having that sort of, when I dealt with student deaths as a principal, turned that part of the emergency response plan. This is what's coming at IT people right now. There are a few in the state that already have a pretty good plan. Most are like, this is pretty subtle, the requirements of cyber insurance. Staff training. October was Cyber Awareness Month for training staff. Some systems will actually give you a fake phishing email to see what staff can bite on. It's good practice. Becoming more aware of what does a phishing email look like. One person I worked with, he's a power company. Is that which bill and everything we fixed on it? What do those look like? Spending the time to do that in the district and specifically central office functions that are unique just the central office. Could go a long way should a bad day come toward you. So there have been 1,331 incidents in schools since 2016. There are some right here in the state of Maine. You can go on K-12-6, which is a nonprofit site, and read about those. But if you just go to that site, just hover over some of these, just say, data breach. What does that mean? W2s. How do they do that? You can read each of these figure out how people sort of go about things. And speaking about how to go about things, I think I'll skip this, but because of the audio, but hacking Google. You want another thing to watch? It's free on YouTube. It's a 5-part series about how Google, it has something like so many billion hits per second worldwide, how they can possibly be secure. Think about your G Suite school. Think about your spam folder. How on earth do they know if this is this and that, this do that at the scale of the computer? This series goes through that. And Google actually has kind of like the military, they have a red team, and all they do is try to hack Google when they leave you. But you don't often know who's on the red team, but they're trying to get in, they're trying to sweep the world. They're planted there. It's pretty amazing. It's a fun watch. All right, so when it comes to cybersecurity, NIST is the National Institute for Standards and Technology. Been around a long time, and they use what emergency management would use, this sort of protocol to identify, protect, detect, respond, and recover. And recently, systems coming on strong. It's a federal arm that is helping in the cybersecurity realm, specifically the schools. There are 2 people in the state of Maine assigned to Maine that I work with, and we're upping our game, and we're behind for sure. It's become kind of a national thing, you know. There are certain national actors in countries they don't hesitate to jump into the school district. So it'll happen to your little tiny schools. But anyways, if you look at each of those, what we're developing is what does that mean for a school? I mean, we have IT directors that are amazing in the state, but they're one person for a school usually. Nobody knows it all. It's a team effort in IT. And what do each of those mean? You're identifying what, who those actors are, what the potentials are, how are you protecting your systems? When I see students get online with their phones, it makes me nervous. Because I'm like, we know that a student in a particular town in Maine did a DDoS attack against the town. It happens. Do they have a plan for that? They did, fortunately. So protecting critical information, which is obviously central office, is probably the most critical information. Detecting what's going on in your network, scanning it constantly to find out what reports are there, what the potential issues might be. This is making a lot of districts decide, should I get that help outside with a vendor that does this all the time? We don't have the cyber expertise in-house. How do I find this? What do I do? And then lastly, to respond and recover. So if you're hit with a data breach or this or that, you stand in the media, who shuts what off, when the exact things have a response. Yeah. So one of the things that we're developing with the higher level IT directors in the state and working with CISA is sort of a curriculum or a training program. So each of those NIST cyber framework areas to say, okay, how do we create a culture in our school district under protecting, where every user is aware. You know, most of your issues that happen with cyber are from within, not necessarily from outside. But somebody did something within. They clicked on this, they clicked on that. You've probably heard of video call safety, some of the things that happened during the pandemic. I guess they called it bombing or so forth, so whatever. How am I doing with time? Oh, no. If I wrap up with the local control piece, these are decisions and all the work going on locally. You know, your wire closet, your Ethernet, closet to closet, fiber into the building, the wide area, it's all unique. We've got an island school, we've got this, we've got that. And our IT directives are amazing. We need more help in the area. They're over, not enough people to get it all done. Student device access, tech plans. Actually, let me go right to what I think central office. Okay. I shouldn't have talked so much from the beginning. The Internet of Things is amazing. The number of things online that would come across your desk, our HVAC, our security cameras, our photocopiers, our lighting system, everything is connected to the network. Tech directors have a lot of support organizations to help them out. And that's what you're seeing here. We'll post this on a DOE site if anybody wants it. And I could get into the details of what IT directors, what superintendents and what school boards can do to help with IT. But real quickly with central office, the first things you can do are password security, multi-factor authentication, use rotating phrases for your passwords. I always used to use one of my kids' name, the number, some symbol, and I use it for everything. And I'm just like changing the password. Just do it. VPN considerations, those of you that work from home, what your VPN is set up like, if you did that, or even working from home, you know, you're good. Segmentation of the network. Is the central office network on the same network that all the students are on? I've got 2,000 students on the same network. That's what we try to get into. But can you segment those networks? We probably should. If the network goes down, central office can't go down. So you can't have that happen. If the rest of the schools go down, central office can go down. Where physical plant meets cyber, the Internet of Things, the number of devices online. Cyber response plans. We're going to help our IT directors out with those that don't have them. Culture we talked about, culture in your organization. Public facing, I mentioned a little bit. What can you actually get to? What's a firewall and what is really secure behind it? On those tabletop exercises, what if Tyler goes down? What if we have something in the cloud and the cloud goes down? It's nice to give the liability to whatever company that's using cloud service. But what are we going to do when they fail? What's our plan? And the redundancy, to test the redundancy of your systems. So run those tabletop. We do 10 fire drills in schools each year. You should probably do 2 cyber drills. So go back to your central offices and say, how do we think about what is this time? What's our plan? It will take, I'll close it this morning. It will take the stress off of the day when that's come, because I'll tell you the thing that I had. And I got an email that said, but wouldn't it be great to have your old website out for the school? Change your web domain to www. Old one is now pointing to something that you really don't want to change for. To buy that back, go to eBay, you bring start to feedback on that. That was 15 years of past websites meetings. Any place that you never sent out, still there on the documents. It's difficult. If somebody took out all this stuff, and then people took it stuff. Now, I was a student of what's up. It's typically 6 hours because I said this isn't changing the function of the service. With a long time, so this isn't changing in 3 or 4 hours. I'm not even telling you, but this is cast out of the place. I didn't know if I could do that, but I'm like, I have to stop. Something as simple as that, just really not thinking about it. There was kind of a legal ransom. I don't think that it was something illegal because we gave it up. But why did we do that? All right, let's finish here. Thank you. When I leave, can you do the thumbs up? I'm going to be looking at that. Thank you.
Thank you, Jim. Today was meant to be an introduction. I only have 3 microphones to make it through the morning. You just unplugged me.
Sorry, wrong one.
That was meant to be an introduction for us. As we talk about topics, we talk about whether we want topics in person, whether we want them to be remote topics. Consider whether this is a topic we want to delve more into as business managers. Do you want more information, more in a weeds level about how to develop these tabletop exercises, how to run payroll? I have talked to 2 or 3 people across the state who are business managers who have run into very serious situations that were going to cost between $500,000 and $1 million. or more. And I know time, thank you, Jim. Time is of the essence in these situations. So having a plan, but not really practicing the plan isn't going to be helpful the day it happens. And that was some of the best advice that was shared with me to share with you in regards to cyber risk and why business managers should care. You may have a situation in your own shop where this has happened. You may not have. And fortunately, for those of us who haven't, we thank our lucky stars. For those of you who have, you probably say, I hope you never do. But everything I have heard from people who have say, have your plan in place, practice the plan, and make sure you're ready to go. And you're ready to go and implement it immediately. Because if you wait and delay, it may cost you a ton of money. And then you're going through federal agencies, state agencies, and insurance to determine what happens next. So think of it from that perspective as you email or reach out to board members to say, is this a topic you want more information on at a more detailed level than what we did today? Stacy Field, Stacy, raise your hand in the back, please. Stacy is on Tri-State. If you have vendors who want to participate in Tri-State, unfortunately, Stacy is our only main rep on that Tri-State committee. Tri-State has subcommittees. And so she is on the vendor committee, is that correct? So any vendors who are interested, please reach out to Stacy and Stacy Field and make sure that that information goes her direction. Next up is ESEA team from Maine DOE led by Cheryl Lang. They're going to talk about ESEA and what we need to know, information about what's important for us to know and what they're seeing at the state level where we can help them and ask questions on our end to share with them about how do we make the collaborative process between ESEA grants, reporting, invoicing, more streamlined, more efficient, so that we're all working together in the same direction. So without further ado, I'll let Cheryl Lang, who is the program coordinator for ESEA, introduce her team and get them set up on technology as well. So you got a couple minutes if you just want to grab a quick drink or something, and then we'll go with the ESEA. You okay? So for anyone watching this via YouTube, we apologize for that, but that is internet-based problems that we're having. And introduce her team, and we'll go with ESEA. This was sent out to you ahead of time, and we will also post it on the website early next week with the other presentations. Thank you.
Thank you, Colin. Can everyone hear me okay? Back. All right, great. Well, thank you, Colin, for inviting us here. When Colin reached out to me and asked me about doing a presentation for business managers, I thought this is a great opportunity really to put our faces with our names as the ESEA federal programs, because we have a lot of new faces on our team, and you are one of our most important collaborators in this journey. The ESEA federal programs serves Title I, Title II, Title III, Title IV, and Title V. What I'm going to do is I'm going to first start off by introducing you to the team, and then you're going to get an opportunity to see how their roles intersect with your roles, depending on what region you're in, and that connectivity to their title specialty as well. So as Colin said, I'm Cheryl Lang, and I'm privileged to be working at the Maine Department of Education as the ESEA Federal Programs Director, and I am joined by most of my team. I did have one member of the team that wasn't able to be with us this morning due to an emergency, and that is Jessica Karen. She is a Title I specialist, and she also serves a particular region of the state that we'll show later in the slideshow. I want to say you are one of our first presentations coming out in person, so we're used to doing this on Zoom, many of us are. And we typically ask that you put the questions in the chat so that we can get through the presentation. We don't have a chat feature here, so what I'm gonna ask you to do is if you can just hold on to your questions, maybe jot them down, and then we'll have an opportunity at the end to ask those questions. And if we don't have the answers for you here and today, we'll make sure that we take those questions back to the department and get the answers and then communicate with you for them. Without further ado, I would like to introduce you to the rest of my team. We first have, in addition to Jessica Karen, to my left, I had to stop and think, right, left, we have, well, actually, I'm gonna pass the microphone around. There's no sense in me taking that whole entire time. Let them introduce themselves. And then we'll bring it back to getting the slideshow started. So Ryan?
All right, as Cheryl said, I'm Ryan Reed. I'm the Title II coordinator here for the state of Maine, and I'm also the regional program manager for the Mid-Coast and Washington County.
Hi everyone, good morning. I'm Rita Polo. I am Title I alongside Jess here, and the regions are Mid-Coast and Work. So everyone, my name is Maria Riley, and I've been with school here, working with schools and other issues, school schools, and here.
January sign up in Title III and Title I coordinator for the city, and I work with the Cumberland and West Virginia.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Myra Corson, and I'm the management analyst for the ESEA federal teams, and I process your invoices.
Last but not least, good morning, everyone. I'm Travis Dowdy. I'm the state coordinator for Nov4 programs. I work commonly with the English superintendent region, and I also oversee the state's language programs.
All right, so we do, as I said, have these regional regional program specialists. And what the reason for that is so that we can really provide you with the best support possible. So every one of us on this team serves in dual capacities. And we have the primary contact for the ESEA for each school district, depends on the region that you're located in. As they all introduce themselves, they told you which regions they serve. That is so that you have one person that you can make those calls to whenever you have any questions at all, and you're wondering, how do I get this question resolved? That would be the regional program manager. So that's why they serve in different capacities across the state, depending on the region. In addition to that, they also have their title specificity. So as you heard them introduce themselves, they said either Title I, Title II, so on. So we use that dual approach so that in addition to having that one contact person, we also have someone that's deeply embedded in the statutory requirements for the particular titles. And then you also heard Renee introduce herself as the school improvement coordinator, which school improvement is the tiered identification that she spoke of. That's a set aside from Title I, and we do service, currently we service 72 schools across the district. Under the Title III identification, where they do get additional funding to support their professional development needs. And that's Renee's role to oversee the coaches and the funding that is supported under Tier 3.
And so we thought it would be nice to share the breakdown of how much money the state gets for each title. You can just see that, you know, probably the majority of you know there's a lot of funding in Title I and more than other programs. So we just wanted to show you that, you know, breakdown, Title II, Title III, 4. So I'm here to briefly just describe Title I. Oh yeah, I've got my teacher list, which I see. But yeah, Part A for Title I, which is the majority of the districts you guys are representing today, funding. It is a high poverty concentration funding, basically right 40% school wide, over. and targeted assistance programs. So those are the two types of programs, targeted and school line, that schools are operating. And really it is all about making sure that that funding is supplementing the necessary academic interventions, improvements in instruction for schools that have high levels of students living in poverty. We also deal with things around academic support, professional development, and parent and family engagement under Title I. Has quite a few sort of obligations there when it comes to engagement with essential asset. And we have a Title I funding spending snapshot. When you guys get this slide deck, you will receive sort of all the links. You can bookmark those or save those to help you understand what's allowable, eligible, and necessary.
All right, Title II. Title II is also a formula grant based on poverty data for the most part, also based on total student population. Our funding comes based on census data. So that annual survey, not the every 10 years, so that annual one that comes out, the survey of selected communities. The census determines the poverty rate, and that determines the amount of Title II funding each school gets. We've had some questions in the last few years about why funding might be going down. I think that survey is just not capturing maybe the poverty data that we all see on the ground level in our communities. So that's something we keep working on with our federal partners to try to help them understand that and try to advocate for better funding. Title II, the main purpose is to increase teacher and principal quality so that we can increase student achievement. So that all titles are about increasing student achievement. And so generally districts use this for things like professional development and coaching, class size reduction, teacher evaluation systems, recruitment and retention, and multiple pathways to teaching and leading. Notice though, it is a focus on teacher and principal quality, and they also include anyone else who has that sort of school administrator label, right? Your assistant principals, dean of students, those folks. It does not cover everyone who works in the school, and it does not cover many of you central office staff. Title II is supposed to be used for teachers, principals, and other school leaders. And I also have included the spending snapshots. You can get this, you can see some examples of things that are allowable and some things that are not.
Thanks, Ryan. All right, so Title III, this is focusing on providing extra supports for multilingual learners or English learners, as statute goes to them. And so it's a formula grant based on a couple different factors. And so in order for a district to receive Title III funding, we have to run the application process, and you have to have a minimum of a $10,000 allocation, which is why so many districts receive Title III. I think we have about 9 this year. The Title III is to support supplemental language instruction programs, professional development, which is we've seen under some of the other categories, as well as parent, family, and community engagement. There's also a separate sub-grant under Title III for the district that has experienced the highest percentage increase in of students for the year. And as you can see, we've got the Title III spending snapshot as well. And so again, you'll be able to see some of the things that are allowable and some of the things that are not so allowable.
So Title IV, as I stated earlier, has a couple of different parts to it. Part A is the one you're probably most familiar with, as it is part of your ODA's consolidated PCA applications. Essentially, Title IV is a multi-purpose block grant. It goes out to the majority of districts in our state. The funding formula is based on each district's relative share of Title I funds in the preceding fiscal year. So if you're ever curious as to how your Title IV funds might change year to year, that's a good indicator. Essentially, the program can be used for a wide variety of programs and activities that either provide professional development for staff or direct support services for students related to the 3 content areas here. So anything in the field of well-rounded education, student health or safety, or effectively leveraging technology for the classroom learning. The other program I oversee is the 21st Century Program, which is a competitively funded program that supports before, after summer school education programs for a wide variety of school-based and non-school-based organizations across the state. You guys, just as a quick plug, if you're interested in that, or you feel your district might be, we are anticipating a new year
funding and new RFP. You know, it's supposed to come in spring. So keep an eye out for that. And of course, I've got this spending snapshot here. And if 21st century is something that might be of interest to you, I've also given last year's RFP. All right, I'm back again for Title V. And so Title V has two parts to it. It's got Part A, which talks about transferability, but then Part B is really where the grant. And so Part B, Subpart 2, because again, you can't just be one part. There's got to be two parts to two parts. So Subpart 1 is a federal grant that is awarded by the U.S. Department of Education directly. But then Part B, Subpart 2 is our state Title V grant. And so Title V, some people will recognize the name as REAP, or the Rural Education Achievement Program. And basically it is supplemental to all of the other title programs. So anything that you can do under any of the other titles, you can do under Title V, which makes it, in my opinion, as friendly and flexible that you can possibly get.
As I said before, I'm going to use the 4-year and I work with the 2 funding, which is out of the fund. And this particular is providing additional support to school agencies in the ongoing challenges. This includes supplemental funds that do not support other USDA funds. We have a new school coach. We have pensions that work to support schools as they work to and also access to free and further description of Title Tier 3 school improvement is that this particular funding part is strictly devoted to professional development of the staff within the Tier 3 identified school. And it does have the 5 spending pots of salaries and benefits, instructional supplies, travel, and purchase services. And the one area that sometimes gets people tripped up a little bit is the instructional supplies. That is a category that is allowable under this particular funding stream if it's directly connected to the need and necessity of how the teachers are going to be engaging in professional development learning. So for example, if they're going to engage in professional development learning, let's say for running records, focusing now running records, and they need those classroom kits in order to be trained on how to effectively conduct running records, then a classroom kit can be provided under instructional supplies as long as the professional development accompanies it. So there's never a black and white answer quite often with the spending. So we just wanted to be able to give you some different examples of how that money can be used. There is no carryover for this particular pot of money. And so the period of availability is from the time you get it, the school gets the grant award notification, then they need to complete the strategic planning application that really shows their intentions about spending the money. And once that application has been approved, they can start invoicing against it right through the end of the year. Well, they have to have the money obligated by 9/30, just like all the other titles. And then they have through the end of the year, through December 31st, just like all of the other titles. But we do really take a look at the plan as a whole, as far as we're looking at allowability, reasonable and necessary. You want to add anything to that, Renee?
All right, hopefully everyone's very familiar with our grant management software at this point, Grants for Me. We were one of the first teams in DOE to sort of migrate that way, and nearly all of our grants on the ESEA team live there now. The only one still left in the Gen system is the FY20 funds, which are being closed out as we speak.
So grants for me handles applications, it handles your reimbursement requests, performance reports, and eventually closeouts. So for us, at least right now, there isn't a grant being closed out because that waiver for FY21 products. Obviously, the link is in the slide. If for some reason someone hasn't been there before, I hope you wouldn't have. The one thing I really want to mention is that, folks get different roles in the system, and folks in the business office, especially business managers, should have the LEA fiscal representative role. And this is not a role we want to be handing out to a lot of other folks. Sometimes, in general, maybe to solve problems, we give a lot of people a lot of different roles. But when we think about checks and balances and about best practices, we want to make sure that we have that fiscal check in place and that we have a business manager who can look over an ESE application and give it that thumbs up and doesn't just get pushed through. And we'll talk a little bit more about that here in a minute, I believe.
All right, so I'm going to talk a little bit about the ESE application itself. So for anybody who's been in the field for more than a couple of months at this point, would know that the application is due on August 1st of each year. And so we do, once we migrated to grants for me, there is a bit of a new process when it comes to actually submitting the grants. And so it doesn't just get submitted by the ESE coordinator and then it comes to us. Now it actually has to get submitted. And then the principals have to sign off if they have a project. And then the business manager has to go in and sign off as well before the superintendent can sign off and get sent in. And so really the piece that we want to really highlight with you guys is that LEA fiscal representative status. So that's the one where you're going in and checking off and making sure it's saying, yes, everything in here is accurate. And so really what we're looking for is that you take a look at the budget overview page for each title. That's going to show where all the funds for an individual title has been budgeted. So whether it's for the salaries, benefits, purchase services, supplies, et cetera. That way you can make sure that what's in the application is what you have in your local accounting system. That way when reimbursements come in, you're able to match those up. And so we've actually linked the accounting handbook for main SAUs. This is the one that just got updated as of September. So it's got all of the codes in there as well. And then another note is making sure that when you go into the application, you download the grant award notification. That has a lot of really good information on it, especially in relation to monitoring support level, the required documentation that needs to come with invoice. And then the last little piece is that, if you see something in the application that doesn't look right, you have the ability to actually reject it and send it back to your ESE coordinator so they can fix it before it comes all the way to us when we have to send it back. So you kind of have that stopgap to be able to do that and make that call if you see something that does not make sense.
All right, good morning, everyone. So I'm just gonna go over some reimbursement issues or guidelines for you. I do review all invoices for each of these titles that you've heard about today. The substantial approval date is the date that these fine folks give the application when it comes in. Not all applications get that approval when they are submitted. So say you submit the application on 8/3, but there's something needs to be changed, and it doesn't get substantial approval until 9/1. You cannot start using those funds or billing against those funds until 9/1. I have some links here to the some good bedtime stories, the spending handbook and 2 CFR 200 for you. And so down below, it's just the workflow request. So your invoices, they come into the department. Well, first of all, you have to put it in grants for me. Then it comes into the department. The ESEA team will review it and approve it. It goes to our state accounting system team, who gives the final approval, and then your money is sent out from there. Okay, so supporting documentation in the new system, Grants for Me, your very first reimbursement for the approved funding application. So say FY 23, the very first reimbursement that you submit, you will be required to submit a detailed trial balance, upload that, and time and effort certification if you're invoicing for salaries, or you may need receipts or invoices for other expenses as well. That's the very first one. And I will be honest with you in saying that I use my best judgment. If you have split your funds, so you're using up FY 22 funds, and you have a very small amount coming off of FY 23, I'm probably not gonna kick that invoice back and ask you to submit time and effort and receipts and all of that on that first one. But it doesn't mean that I won't down the road in that same grant. Make sense? And then all other reimbursement requests for the same grant year, the system does require you to submit a detailed trial balance, minimum, that's your minimum requirement. And then, of course, always reserve the right to ask for additional backup.
Right. So I'm going to talk to everybody a little bit about performance reports and what it means to close out the ECA grant award. So everyone should be either just wrapping up or kind of maybe in the throes of working on FY 22 ECA performance report right now. And basically what this is it's a portion of your grant applications for each fiscal year. They get turned on as additional pages when the initial 15 months we have to obligate to spend funds has transpired. And it's basically a reconciliation of how programs, activities, and funds have been carried out through that 15 month period. So you'll notice here that I give an example here of a reporting period. Again, for the performance report, you're covering the date of substantial approval for whatever that particular fiscal year's application is through September 30th of the following year. So if we're using this year as an example, you might have approval as of August 1st, in which case the reporting period would span from August 1st through September 30th of the following year. And this is where, again, we're reporting out on project-based outcomes, project-based expenses, supplemental data that the state needs to complete our own federal reporting, etc. One thing that I personally noticed, and I think most of us on the team notice as a bit of a stumbling block that happens year to year, and some of you want to make sure that folks try and avoid in the future, is submitting performance reports when your billing is not yet up to date for the fiscal year you're submitting. And when I say up to date, I mean that your school district has requested payment against all ESEA funding through that September 30th end. One of the things we at the state look at in review of these is to see that there's clear alignment between what we've paid you out through September 30th and what you've self-reported as expenditures through September 30th. So if those numbers don't align by virtue of the mistakes that have been made in the reporting, or based on the fact that you've reported expenses through 9/30, but you've only billed for expenses through, say, June 30th. Those are the types of issues that will cause performance reports to be sent back. That can be very easily avoided if we just wait and include the financial data after that September 30th. And one thing I'll just add from the previous slide as well. So one thing that we were also doing a little bit differently this year as compared to last year, and we can something forward, is as far as billing is concerned, when we talk about that hard cutoff at September 30th, we won't begin processing any subsequent invoices for October 1st or later. So anything for the beginning of the carryover period or later until such time as that performance report is approved. So again, it's causing confusion in the past with folks reporting expenses that don't like the periods we're seeking in the performance report. So it's a very intentional cutoff date, and we just want to make folks aware that if you've already submitted and you've submitted for October, that October payment might take a little while to process while we work on it. And then lastly, I'll just talk about closeout. As Ryan mentioned earlier, this isn't something we've done in the grants currently yet, but this will be forthcoming next year in relation to FY22 funds. And so basically, what closeout consists of as compared to performance reports. So the performance reports, you're reporting out on project-based outcomes, you're reporting supplemental information like the number of Title I students that are served, and you're also reporting out on expenditures. When it comes time to do closeout, it's just a final reconciliation of your project-based expenses for each type. So basically, once you've reached the point in time where either we reached 9/30 of that following year, or you've fully expended your ESEA funds for a given fiscal year, you can go in, make a revision to your previously approved performance report, and just update those project-based expense reporting pages with your final expenditures. At the time that that's done, we will basically, we'll go in and approve it, and that'll basically close out that fiscal year's period. So the long and short of kind of the pieces we talked about in relation to application performance report closeout. Application covers the first 15 months that funds become available. So whatever your date of substantial approval is through September 30th that following year. The performance report covers your expenditures for that same time period. It's in the other supplemental data pieces we talked about. And then the closeout report here covers the final 12 months that constitute your carryover. So basically, any funds that weren't expended in those first 15 months, reconciliation of how those get expended throughout the remainder of time. So you'll notice too that we're working on closeout right now for FY20 in our former gem system. That's because we've had a federal waiver that extended the period of time that those funds were available for. Basically meant those reports coming a year later.
Okay, so this is recommendations for success in closing out your finances when it comes to ESEA funding. The relationships that you have with your ESEA coordinators are very important. It's important for them to be able to do their job and for you to be able to do yours. If you don't know who your ESEA coordinator is, you're in trouble. They're in trouble. It makes it difficult. They need to, or you need to provide them with the numbers for their performance reports, their closeout reports, and this does impact their funding. Best practices when submitting invoices: do not extend your billing period or service period for your invoice beyond 3 months. That is the maximum. Keep it within 3 months. We should all be caught up by now. I wasn't here when they did the migration to transfer me, but I understand that they allowed catch up. Provide the correct documentation to support expenses. So if you are billing for, let's say, Title II funds for 3 months, your trial balance should be for those 3 months. I shouldn't be looking at something that's for the entire year. Okay. And then we just have some sites that you can go to, links to information for trainings and resources from the Maine Department of Education website. Questions? Anybody got questions? Oh, so some hot topics for reimbursements. Backup that has just a credit card machine receipt. We cannot accept that. Okay, The reason being is it's not detailed, there is unallowable expenses, right? We need to verify that everything is acceptable. Same with Amazon, you can buy a lot of things off of Amazon these days. So please, attach the detailed receipt as well. Okay? Questions?
The question is, why when we are getting reimbursements, we're getting them in chunks not equal to what we had invested?
Okay, so that is because, your invoices are consolidated to the consolidated application. However, in the application, you may have transferred some funds from, say, Title II to Title I, but the, reimbursement goes back to the original title. Okay, so, yeah, so different accountants handle different funding in the service center. So say you have, you're gonna get reimbursed from Title I, Title II, III, whatever. It could be possibly 3 different accountants in the service center actually paying those invoices out. That's why you get partial payment. So although that in the formal question, let's see if I can reiterate that for the recording. What she said was they're getting lump sums of possibly, like, say, 2 Title II invoices, one from way back and one from the present on the same, in the same reimbursement. Is that correct? Yes. I don't have an answer for that because, like I said, your payments are issued through our service center. I'm not sitting there writing you checks, but, but I'm sure it is because they too are trying to catch up. During the pandemic, they had a shortage in staffing as well.
So one of the things that might happen is you submit a Title I reimbursement form that has money that's been transferred from Title II. And then you also submit a Title II reimbursement request. If the Title II piece gets approved first, it'll take the chunk from that Title I invoice and the entire Title II invoice, and you'll send that as well. So I think that's what we're referring to, is like, it doesn't quite line up with what we're asking for. I came up with that.
Right.
So this system is designed to control everything proportionately, with the caveat that in FY 21 in the old system, you did not bill that way, right? You would have had a separate invoice for Title II funds that you transfer to Title I. So for FY 21, that proportion, the system's trying to do the math on the back based on whatever balance is left. But moving forward in 22 and 23, it should be an exact proportion to whatever your transfer amounts are. I believe, yes, and they're also, once the invoice is fully processed, everyone's paid, on the expenditure, not the expense, on the request page, there's a payment details link that does break down how much you're getting from each cycle. But I know that comes after some of the checks have already hit your bank account, so it's.
Does everybody?
Does everyone know where that payment details is? Would it be helpful for us to show you? Go ahead, yeah, fine, yeah. Right, I believe it does go live once all the payments have been approved by our service center. Well, he's finding that, yeah. The question to the folks online is more concern around the time it takes from when you folks submit an invoice to actually getting that full reimbursement back, and what that timeline looks like. From the tax, all right. So with our applications, our performance reports, our invoices, we try to have an internal turnaround time of 2 weeks once it gets to us. So that's sort of, you're starting that clock, right? And then if for some reason backup documentation was not enough at that time, you could potentially be restarting that clock. Why it's important, have that good communication, make sure your application is set up so that you don't have to revise that. That's what you can kind of control on your person. We have our 2 weeks. I think Tyra's getting pretty good at being above that line, but I don't want to tell you that.
I'm trying.
Quicker than 2 weeks. And then we've been told by our service center that they have a similar timeline. Unfortunately, we can't control it once it leaves our hands. We do try to process everything we can as fast as we can, so you know how important it is for all of us. Do we have a district that we can pull up really quick that wants us to transfer funds or recent invoice? So the 15.
And then we'll be able to provide you with
Alright, so Dan's got an invoice up here for NSA 15. This is the request page, sort of summarize how much money goes to reimbursement. At the top, you can see there's a payment details link. You go there. You can see here how much they have and how much is coming from each title. So in this case, for this particular invoice, 2549.38 is paid out of Title 2, and 14,264.80 is paid out of Title 5. So we do have that historical record, has the invoice number, it has the check number, but the reason it doesn't populate is because that information isn't there until like 5%. Then they go to like 5%. So if you're getting your payments electronically, there are reports available if you don't want to access them that can break down where it's coming from. Very neat stuff. Yes. the question is, our invoicing system is title-based, but ESA application is set up project-based. And sometimes that can be hard for an ESA coordinator to know, I'm assuming, how much to budget in each project, and then when you're reporting what went with each project. Yeah.
So a couple things that I've seen, because I know originally when we started looking at grants for me, we actually asked for project-based invoice. But the problem with that was you'd have to invoice, you could only submit one Title I invoice at a time. And if you've got 4 Title I schools, and then you've got your Title I family engagement project, you can only invoice for one of those things at a time. So you would literally be spitting out, invoices nonstop. I mean, it would be, and so as soon as we saw that, we're like, yeah, we don't want to, make everybody go crazy. So we'll pull that back so it's not at the project level. I have seen some districts that when they're setting up their accounting systems with their new application and the funding, that they actually code the projects in their own accounting system. And so that way, whatever the code is for that they use, they'll put like a -1 after it, which is, it'll be professional development or teacher quality, whatever it is. And so they'll know internally they can pull reports just for that specific project. And so I've seen a couple of districts do that. They say it works pretty well. But that's just one thing that I've seen.
You have a follow-up? I saw you.
Absolutely.
Always, that's like what we do, right? We answer your folks' questions. We're there to support you. That's really our job. Everyone apologizes when they call. I'm so sorry to call you. Like, no, don't. This is my job. This is what I do. That's great. Other questions?
All right, so I just want to say thank you again, Colin, for inviting us. Thank you all for wanting to know more about the ESPA federal programs. As we said earlier, we really want to have that connectivity, that collaboration between the ESPA federal programs, coordinators in your districts, between our department, between you as their business managers, the superintendents. It's really important that we all know what's going on with the applications for this funding so that we can be the most effective and efficient of the jobs that we do. I will take that question back to our accounting department and see if we can get some sort of clarity on it or a solution and get back to you on that. As we said earlier, this slideshow is going to be given to you, and it has all of our contact information right there, our email addresses and our phone numbers. And in closing, I just want to say, one of the things that we're really striving for is really effective and efficient communications and best practices, and you can really help us with that. So when you make that phone call into us, if we're not able to answer the phone, we ask that you leave a detailed message with your name and contact information, and then you can expect a call back from us within 48 hours. Again, we give those windows as our window. We obviously try to make it sooner, but for best practice, it's not as efficient and as effective if Dan doesn't answer the phone, so then you turn around and you call Travis, and then Travis doesn't answer the phone, so you turn around and call Ryan. That really doesn't help with the efficiencies and effectiveness. So what we want is we want to just make sure that we're open and transparent about the expectation within our department for those communications. And then, as we said, when applications, when performance reports come to us, we give ourselves that unique window. Again, we do our very best to try to turn it around much quicker than that, because as Ryan said earlier, we know that then things are going to have to go through another channel before it gets turned around completely. So that 2-week turnaround is just our guideline. Now, with that said, we all know that everywhere has been impacted by staffing shortages. And so we're just getting our team built back up to full capacity. And we know that everybody has those experiences and we might not be able to hold to those timelines, but that's our commitment to do our best to do that. So if you don't hear from us within those times, then feel free to reach back out to us. And, maybe volunteer, maybe it fell through the cracks, and we want to know about that. So we've given you our contact information, and we do really want to involve you in the process as much as we can. So what we said with the application, we do require business managers to sign off on the approval, but that was a very intentional decision on our part to have you have that review so that you can have that set of eyes on it and make sure it looks like what you would anticipate in spending money on in addition to your funding. So you have the authority and the accountability to go in and redo that application before you get approved. And you also have the autonomy to hit reject and send it back. So I want to thank you all very much, and we really do appreciate having this time with you today.
I want to thank the entire team for showing up today, for taking time out of your schedule. I do want to thank two folks. I want to thank Cheryl. Cheryl and I talked pretty frequently, as did Shelley. And Karen, I know you're here today, so please share that with your team as well, especially Shelley and the whole team there, as well with your team. We appreciate the connection, we appreciate the communication. I can't say enough. One of my goals when I became president years ago was to increase communication between state agencies, whether it was Jim Chass's, your team, or federal team, MSMA, and outside vendors that we deal with as well as students we deal with day in and day out. That expectation has been met and consistent in that. And we share each other's cell phones. We don't abuse that privilege. I have Shelley's cell phone. Email messages to MeASBO if you're asking questions and not getting results, and you need our organization to help foster change, answer questions, increase communication in some way. That's what we're here for as an organization, and that's what we're trying to strive for. That's what the teams are trying to strive for. This team, the federal teams, and other teams. So please do that. If you feel that something is not right or there needs to be more communication, please email that in. We monitor that email, and I will respond with a type of letter to Cheryl or to Shelley or to other teams and like that. Please don't let it linger for 4 months and say, well, nothing's been done for 4 months. If that really is worrying you that we're not getting the results we need to be our job, maybe it's a communication breakdown, or maybe something needs to change, but we can't help foster that communication and that change. Does that make sense to everybody? Thank you very much. Thank you all.
Thank you.
Before we break, our next meeting isn't in person for a while. We will be doing some Zoom meetings and trying to do that over the coming months. Is there anything else that anyone wants to comment on, ask questions of, or bring forward for today before we leave? Was this morning beneficial to you? I'm seeing the yeses. Hopefully you feel it was worth your time. Thank you for the thumbs up. Hopefully it was worth your time. We are going to continue with our 4 in-person meetings a year. The board will reevaluate that at the end of the year, but the board at summer retreat this year really felt it was important to build connections. I saw folks talking to Dave Jones afterwards, asking specific questions. I saw other people talking to other people within the organization. We as a board still feel those connections are valuable. We also understand people cannot make every meeting. We are doing our best to create opportunity for both, in addition to doing Zoom meetings outside of more in-person meetings a year. I hope that works for people. We are diligently trying as a volunteer board to meet everyone's needs as best we can across the entire state. The meetings in February and April will be in Portland and Bangor. I do not know which one will be at which location yet. We try to spread the meetings around the state. We've done Lewiston, this now in Augusta. We will be doing Portland and Bangor in the winter and spring. Hopefully that provides you an update on what we're doing as a board. Hopefully you found today beneficial. I do want to ask one other question before we leave of who's here today. Would it be more beneficial if we did this type of meeting in an AM and an in-depth professional development in the afternoon and provide a lunch in between? We used to do that years ago, and we used to find a topic where we brought in experts, whether it's human resource, whether it's account coding, whether it's something else, and do an afternoon session from like 1 to 3. Can I see who might be interested in that if it were offered? Okay, thank you. It's helpful because sometimes if you have to leave the office for the day, some people like to get home early on Friday and say, no, I don't want an afternoon session. Others say, you don't keep me there till 4 or 5. Yeah, if it's 2:30, 3 o'clock or something, and I'm already out of the office, pack as much into that day as you can. That information is helpful for us as a board to determine, do we leave at noon or do we provide additional programming in February and April to try to extend that another couple hours and really build in a full day of education experience. If there's nothing else, one more time, anybody? I thank you all for coming. Have a safe journey home, and I'm sure you'll be hearing from us again soon, albeit remotely.